Hey everyone, welcome to r/Tales from Tech Support, where we get to have a little chuckle at the technologically disadvantaged. Like me. I'm Uncle Reddit, and have I got a story for you. As most of you that follow me regularly know, I've been having some technical issues with my camera, audio, and editing, and all kinds of stuff, and trust me, the irony of the tech issues that I'm having is not lost on me. But hopefully we'll have that straightened out this weekend. At the latest by next weekend. So, a little over a week. So until then, we're just going to muddle through and see what we can make happen. Because it's not a computer. I used to do tech support for my family. I stopped because it was too hard, emotionally. My mother's incredibly stubborn and creative in the new ways she finds to do things on computers that result in them not working. A close family friend who is an IT professional had taken over, which worked well until he moved to the other side of town. A few months back I had a spare USB docking station, monitor, mouse, and keyboard, so I gave it to my family to make it easier for my mother to use her laptop. She asked me to set things up, however there was a COVID lockdown and I had a phone conversation where I said something to the effect of, "There isn't anything to set up, you just plug it all in and use it. Try that first and I'll troubleshoot if it doesn't work." Nothing happened. COVID lockdown finished, and when I'd visit the docking station remained unused. And at some point I'd just set the thing up. So time passes. A few weeks ago I said, "How about I show you how to use the docking station?" I got her laptop, plugged it into the docking station, and everything worked. Mom was fine and happy and browsing away. I left. 20 minutes later I get home and get a call. Mom: "Hey, what password do I use to log in?" Me: "The same one you always use." Mom: "No, I want to log into the new device." Me: "Use your laptop password to log in." Mom: "No, I want my laptop off and I want to use the docking station to browse and connect to the internet." Me: "That's not possible. You have to use your laptop to do that. You're using your laptop, just use your laptop password." Mom: "I don't want to use my laptop. I've turned it off. I just want to use the thing you set up to use the laptop. What's the password for it?" Sorry, I don't follow. What do you want? I also have no idea how there was anything to log into if she had turned off the laptop. Mom: "I want to browse the internet with the thing you set up." At this point I had an epiphany. Mom, that thing is not a computer. There's only one computer there, your laptop. Without your laptop, there's nothing to connect the internet to. That thing just makes it easier to connect other things to your laptop. Mom: "But I want to use the internet on the thing." You can't, it's not a computer. "But I thought it could connect to the internet." It's not a computer, it can't. Mom: "Oh, I think I get it. I'll call you later." Click. I've noticed a trend, and I used to think it was just old people, but it's not. There's a huge part of society, and I have trouble with this sometimes too, where they have trouble getting their head around some of the abstract ideas behind computers, networking, things like that. They're just so used to grabbing a device and it just works. And then, when you try to get them to make changes, they can't. Their head explodes. A tale as old as tech. Just happened, but it's a classic scenario and follows all the tropes. An executive complains to his assistant about internet. Assistant doesn't file a report, but instead had an outburst on the phone with a random/unrelated tech support person on the company's general support hotline. Exec would need VIP support in person since we have teams dedicated for that. This poor soul gets yelled at with zero details and gets hung up on. She tries to gather what she can and report it to her supervisor, who seeks out another supervisor who seeks me out. It's confusing because there are multiple offices in different states and the execs fly around a lot. "Okay, where do you need me to be?" Supervisor: "He's on the 9th floor. Me: "Nobody here." I'm added to a group chat. Someone else: "4th floor. Me: "No one here." Starting to realize no one knows where he is, and what his specific issue is because this is all reactionary from the manager. Ordering their legions of staff to throw their bodies onto a problem with no idea what's going on or what their roles are for that matter. Severely understaffed and mismanaged. After a bunch of back and forth, she procures me the exec's number. I just casually call his cell. Me: "Hi, which floor are you on? You need help with Wi-Fi?" Executive: "Oh, I'm actually in a different state today, and I resolved it myself, and didn't tell anyone." Her manager grumbles and tells the teletext she needs to get her details straight. I'm a contractor, so I kinda don't care about some of the hierarchies at the company. I thanked her for being able to gather all the information from an angry phone call about an issue unrelated to her duties. Managers are treated like children and yelled at, so they just react to every situation by drumming up chaos, not standing their ground regarding their own protocols. I know it's not a very spicy or dramatic one, but it's just frustrating that this kind of thing is rampant. Maybe y'all can relate. It's amazing how many bosses have no business being in the position they're in. While they may be very skilled in their particular part of a field, it doesn't mean they can run a business. It doesn't mean that they can run employees, implement procedures, all that stuff. Sometimes I think most of them should have just stayed where they were at the last level before they became boss. Although corporations being a lot like the military, they probably got promoted because they were so inept at the last job they did too. I didn't spend 7 years in medical school to fix your crap, working for a manufacturer of things that were not medical related. I got a voicemail from an MD screaming about some piece of hardware. Your stupid device doesn't work and your voicemail box isn't configured. This was on my personal voicemail, which is configured. No phone number, no name, no idea where the call originated from. The only thing I was certain of is that we were not in the business of making medical instruments of any kind. A few similar messages landed in my Vmail in the ensuing week, until I finally managed to live answer one of these calls. After calming the caller down, I pieced together what was going on. The medical device in question was a bit of office automation, nothing patient-facing, thank God. The caller described having trouble with his device and calling the phone number on the leaflet that came in the shipping carton with said device. That phone number was misprinted, and thousands of these devices were shipped with a bogus tech support number. The number printed on the paper was one of my 500 DIDs, coincidentally used, with no TN and no voicemail box. Those few callers that managed to leave me a message simply pounded 0 until my employee's admin assistants, there were 3 sharing call answering duties, answered. They apparently didn't question why IT support requests were coming in on an outside line. They merely forwarded the call to my number. Until the day I ripped that PBX off the wall, that DN still had an outgoing message in my malodorous, dulcet tone. You've reached not the company you think you called. Please note that we do not make the device for which you are attempting to get support. That company misprinted their documentation and gave you the wrong number. For support on your device, please call the medical device company on the other side of town at phone number. That was a fun call with their IT department. I decided I should speak tech to tech rather than try to explain it all to their marketing or quality staff. A few Tales from Tech Support quality anecdotes were shared while we brainstormed the solution on my end, and while she started rattling cages in her own shop. So back in the days of landlines, when you couldn't go on these fancy cellular devices, a friend of mine's family had just moved into the area, and their new number was an old phone number for one of the old local phone companies. And a lot of older people still had this phone company, but the main office had moved. Well, you know how people are with utility companies. They get ticked off all the time and claim they're not getting the service they wanted. Why is my bill so high? And this family got call after call after call, all hours of the day and night, and people screaming at them and abusing them because of something wrong with their bill or their phone service. Eventually, they did pay the fee to go ahead and have their number changed, even though it was the phone company's error. But you got to do what you got to do. Where are the project requirements? What do you mean? That's what we're paying you for. Over the last year or so, I've had the pleasure of watching roughly 2/3 of our little consultant company's workforce quit and run for the hills, mostly due to the mismanagement of a pair of absolute train wreck projects. The guy next door has an antique shop. He also has one across the street, and every day he goes walking back and forth about 50 times with a hand truck with some sort of piece of furniture or boxes on it. He takes stuff over there, he brings stuff back. We call it Bill taking his furniture for a walk. 1. To upgrade a completely functional but no longer supported by the vendor Angular tool site by completely rebuilding it as a dedicated .NET thing. We're not going to dwell on all the silliness involved in this, though I will mention that when I first pitched in, they handed me a 1,200-line static HTML page that was very obviously created by copy-pasting the Angular output and having an intern manually go through it and set up the mappings. I don't really know how they wound up at that point, only there was a lot of uninformed promises and estimates in early phases, and the constant rotation of people working on, realizing it's insane and then quitting. Eventually, at the cost of the company's most senior developer and architect, that nosedive leveled off to the point where, only 8 months behind schedule, the customer now has an app just as good as the one they started with, and we can now start working on improvements. The other project didn't go nearly so well. To start with, some important groundwork. Our little company's CEO is comically out of touch. He used to code at some point, at least that's what he says, and believes this makes him an adequate subject matter expert as far as estimates and approaches go, and that he's one of us. Seriously, he keeps dragging the one on-site junior dev out to random lunches to shoot the crap, and he's invited us all to his virtual birthday party next month with instructions to bring an amusing or embarrassing anecdote about working with me. Oh my god. Shades of The Office. This is The Office in real life. Imagine that energetic but unqualified guy that got added to your team, so you do your best to push him towards the pointless busy work tasks and have someone more senior double-check literally everything he does in case he accidentally sets the office on fire. Yup, see? That's Michael Scott. Except he's a CEO and perfectly willing to override or fire anyone who second-guesses his genius. He does not grasp why he doesn't get more honest feedback, though I'm working on that. My role in this is just being a senior-ish dev on an absolutely bulletproof contract, who's been feeling bad about the 2 remaining junior devs and have been doing some OT, paid, you better believe it, to help triage the train wrecks and get things moderately back on track. However, since I'm cheerfully cynical about the whole thing and perfectly willing to call the CEO's BS, what's he going to do, fire me and let the customer direct hire me without breaching their contract? I've somehow been designated as both his friend and only expert worth listening to. I mostly just act as an interpreter between him and the junior devs, since there's a direct correlation between people quitting and how much they have to interact with crazy CEO man. Now onto the second train wreck project. When I first got brought in to survey the wreckage and give my input on what needs to be done to get things back on track, I was told we were writing a fair-sized piece of middleware to transform incoming web requests and then shove them into various databases, replacing a bunch of SQL-stored procedures that nobody at the customer's company is qualified to maintain. That all sounded decent enough until I asked to see the requirements and tech design docs, which didn't exist. That's not to say there was nothing. We had piles of documentation on the assorted use cases for the middleware, mostly made by the single junior dev who did 90% of the actual code work, who extracted the data from the customer's team via an absolutely grueling series of meetings. We also had piles and piles of other documentation from the 3-ish prior attempts to inject some amount of sanity and order into the process, which were all put on hold by the CEO, since the team needs to be writing code to show the customer we're working hard. Needless to say, those people quitting was a complete surprise to him. So in short, we've got a project with little to no documentation, but on the bright side, that one junior dev had been soldiering through like a champ, working with the ground level folks at the customer to generate requirements and design on the fly so he could keep writing code, and good code at that. Honestly, it looked to me like all we really had to do was shake some concrete official requirements out of the customer and draw up a decent design docs. And then just let the junior dev keep working without the CEO or customer jogging his elbow all the time. I relayed this information to the CEO and volunteered to be the customer shaker for this so I can make sure we actually get what we need, and then get told not to worry about it. He'll handle it personally in his meeting with the customer's chief of ops coming up that week. Well, after several days of working on getting internal documentation straightened out with the team, junior dev and a newly hired mid-level guy, who the CEO fired for not being a team player within the month, I finally get the word back from the CEO about how the meeting with the customer went, and the word is, stop. No more coding, none at all. Just sit there and document stuff. I was honestly elated since this was what I'd been telling him was needed since the start, but then I found out the reason why. The customer didn't want our code. Not because it was bad, but because he'd never asked for it in the first place. Oh my god. The contract was apparently to analyze their internal system and generate a requirements doc for the customer, preferably without wasting any of his people's time asking silly questions like, well, what their damn requirements are. This is where it finally clicked for me and I realized that it was just the leadership on both sides that was crazy. Not just ours. See, anyone who's been around the block a few times as a dev can tell you that requirements are a huge, absolutely crucial, and easily mess-upable part of any project. And the surest way to torpedo the whole project is to have the requirements written by people who aren't the actual users. While it's possible to hire a consulting company to help you make a good requirements document, telling them just to do it for you is a catastrophically stupid idea, virtually guaranteed to end with the customer holding a completely useless pile of garbage and lawsuits about how much they'd paid for it. The customer's COO didn't agree though. He didn't want his people wasting their time on planning their own systems upgrade. Those are hours they could be doing real work. This COO guy had gone through negotiations at least 5 different larger contracting firms, who all dug in their heels on the requirements issue and refused to take on the project. So rather than take the hint, the COO decides to hire a separate firm just to make the requirements documents, so he could then take them to the larger companies he'd already been negotiating with. Of course, he didn't have much better luck since now he was just explicitly asking for the stupid part up front. But then enter our CEO, who happily agreed that it sounded totally reasonable and he'd get the team on it right away. The first 2 senior people our CEO tried to put on the contract flatly refused, but one of our project managers was incapable of telling him no. So the project started with the PM and a few devs who quickly realized what a crap show this all was, and took turns quitting, until it was just the junior dev doing the work and the CEO acting as the project manager. Despite all this turnover and our CEO's magical ability to reshape his perception of reality to fit his internal narrative, this shouldn't have been enough to forget what the whole point of the contract was. But he maintains that the initial customer contract was for a whole rebuild, not just generating the requirements for it out of thin air. Fortunately, our CEO had a moment of lucidity and dropped the contract rather than press further. The final cherry on top of this, that led to so much wasted code, was that the customer's leadership was just as bad at communication as ours, and his entire team thought we were there for a rebuild too. Hence all the time they were willing to spend talking with junior dev and testing his work. We had to tell them what was going on, and at the final meeting where we handed over the jumbled pile of documentation we'd accumulated and the 85% complete piece of middleware, you could just hear the frustration and resignation in their voices as they talked about how close they got to replacing all the SQL spaghetti they'd been dealing with for the last 10 years. And thus ends the tale of 2 idiots. Oh my god, it's like Michael and Dwight each had their own business, and that's how they met. This could be like a bizarro world, alternate universe. But this goes back to the old, the boss usually got there because of other reasons. The more money than sense, or, who you know, whatever. But it's not always because of their skills in being able to run a company. Hey guys, thanks for hanging out with me today. If you've enjoyed this content, would you do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and maybe click that little bell icon so you don't miss the fat guy with the beard telling you stories. See ya!